Okay, you're recording.
Okay, welcome to the second session. I'm going to just remove my little hello here. Well, we have learned this morning already about the 6 phases how to design a site immersion, recording, analysis, synthesis, ideation, and final design. But the first and best way to go about it to really understand site, and I will start with a very simple site to make it easy. This is your site, okay, with a little building, and this is the roof. There's the terrace. There's a tree. There's footpath. There's a road. Is that this is the first thing, and how, and obviously there's another, let's say there's more. It's another house. There's another house here, and there are trees. The trees, and there's maybe a back street. There's more. So the most important is there is no design, just, I'm going to do it in red, for the site. You always have to include the surrounding area, always. And this is very different in architecture, which is very defined by the legal boundary of the building. Of course, they have to take into account. But architects have not got to take into account what we have to take into account, that every second the climate changes, the sun changes, the wind changes, the groundwater flows under your site, it changes. The rainworm crosses underground, under your legal boundary. So it's a completely different system. And to actually understand this, I sort of use the block diagram which Ian McCarg used in his planning studies and studio teaching in the 60s and 70s, and extended that, what I call the cube method. And I'm going to teach you that now, how to do that. So we've learned, we have the site. I'm just going to draw it like that. This is your site, what I have just shown. And what I will do is, instead of drawing it like that, I draw it on an axis and I tilt it like that. The site has to be 90 degrees angle. That's important to do so. So you just take the drawing and you tilt it on a piece of tracing paper. And then after that, you can draw up the lines. So we'll do this again one more time, that it is clear. And then you can start investigating the site, but more specifically, you can investigate around the site. So this is the 0 line, which you don't really see. There's your site. We draw it like that. Let's say here's the site. That's the outline of your house. There's the tree. And you tilt it. And then you put down some lines like that. So, and you will see in a minute why I'm doing that. Most important is this thing is sort of 90 degrees. This angle here, this angle should be about 45, but it doesn't need to. It looks a bit distorted, but it doesn't need, but it's the quickest way to do a drawing. And so what we are going to do now is we are going to, you have these couple of red lines, so you can align perpendicular the size. You can actually perpendicular draw the building as a real building, you see, like that. You draw it perpendicular. Or if that's the tree, we have the line here, you can draw the tree. Let's say nice big tree. That's what we were normally taught in school. Of course, that is fine, but that's not enough. We have to look around the site as well. So we can add, and this is my part to it, where I extend the site out to all sides. And then I can also investigate the surrounding context. Let's say what I've shown you before is the street. There's the street middle line, there's the other side, and then there are trees, small ones, because my iPad is not big enough. I draw a bigger one here, so bigger one goes out there. It's another one. So these are the trees. Shows you the scale. These trees are big, but this is a small house. And always draw a person. So I draw that person black. Here's the person, another person. And there's the car. Really quick. And the truck. Really quick as well. So gives you a scaling. Now, this is all crystal clear. That's how we were always taught in school. And I say that's not enough. I say we need to look underneath the soil. So you could then add, and that's why you drew these red lines. You can phone at the municipality or a map and ask for the groundwater table. Let's say it's down here somewhere, which then will tell you, and I'm going to draw the roots green so you see it. These are the roots. What kinds, and then that immediately, and I'll show you a really cool tool in a minute, that will tell you that this is a machine. A tree is a stormwater machine. It has roots, it sucks up water, and then it evapotranspires it through, as ET, evapotranspiration, through the leaves. So it's a real machine. And then on top, I draw it red. Well, I don't draw it red, I'll make it orange. Bird species fly, I'm going to do big birds, fly through your garden as well. And you're starting to see this thing is starting to get three-dimensional. So we are not, and I draw it a little bit clearer here. So this is the texture of the soil profile. And then you can investigate, let's say there's a fence to the neighbor, and the neighbor has a tree here. Where's the shade if you put in, for example, on top, the sun, which runs this way. So really quickly, I'm going to add north point. North is this way, north. So this is east and this is west. So the sun does that. So for the day, this is what happens here. It can shade your building, can shade your terrace. So you can start using the cube as a real site immersion tool. So to show you that in layers in a section, this is the soil profile. This is underneath. This is the water table. This is the tree with the roots. And then the bird species. So there's this movement. It's an airport, particularly in a city with lots of impervious surfaces. Trees are very important for many animals. So we are looking holistically at the landscape. And then, and I do this in a different diagram, but then you could also integrate the grading. I can add it here. So you could put, I'm going to make it really thick that you see it. So this side could also be on a slope. So then draining this way, and you could add the cloud, and then how the rainwater is managed, because you're not officially allowed to drain, for example, from your site onto public property. So what do you do? Put a swale here or something. So it helps you immediately to investigate your project. So you've learned three things. First, you never design a site alone. Never without the context, understanding it. Second, the context is not just looking at the topography. You need to understand what's happening underneath and what's happening above. And thirdly, the legal boundary is not a boundary. So for example, if I draw here the fence, whoops, smaller. If I draw a fence in my section here, really simple, the rainworm will go underneath, the groundwater will go underneath, and the wind, if it blows really hard, I'm just drawing it here, wind, And if this is a solid or wall, there will be turbulences. If it's see-through, it's actually maybe better, or if it's a hedge, it depends. But it's just a legal boundary with roots. It doesn't mean anything to the climate. It doesn't mean anything to the animals. They don't care. So as a designer, you cannot just design for the legal boundary. You have to understand what's happening around this site. And then you can obviously add, I'm going to use a different slide, new sketch, create. Hopefully it does it, save, do not save. There you go. You can, use the cube to actually investigate deeply about the senses as well. So if this is your site and you know your soil profile, it's, let's say, draining this way. These are the, you can see how quick I draw it. It doesn't matter, it isn't even perfect. Maybe the groundwater table is 2 meters where you are. So you can then decipher what kind of, let's say, tree species is correct to get enough water when it is really in a hot period. You can start thinking about climate resiliency. You can think about what spurt species are attracted to your trees. The trees are also important for migrating birds and so on. They create shade. So understanding this complexity is really important. On that note, and this is really important, recently I walked down my street and I love cherry trees. So I show you what happened. So this is the road, this is the curb, this is the verge, this is the footpath where Daniel is walking. And then there's the house. And this is where the crooked, beautiful, old cherry trees are. Wonderful, look beautiful in April, but they have these kinds of roots. So now this footpath is, after 50, 60 years doing this, and an old lady may trip really quickly. Here's the car. And so this is the inappropriate tree species along a verge of a road, because the tree has a wide root. So, very smart, 2 professors over 150 years drew all the, over 150 years, all the most famous, biggest plants we have and their roots. And this is a really cool resource, Wageningen University in Holland, where you can go in and they're all hand-drawn by 2 professors. That's their whole career, what the roots dimensions are when they're fully grown. So that means the tool can be used, and that's why I use the plant. We are landscape architects. Plants are really important. So maybe the cherry is not appropriate when the verge is only 2 meters wide. Maybe it should have a tree which should be selected. I'm just drawing in a red so it's clear, with a taproot proportion, and maybe more this way higher up, so that the truck is not down all the time bouncing into the branches. So the appropriateness of designing rigorously can only happen through 3-dimensional thinking. And you can do this either with Rhino model, if you're interested, or much faster with the hand-drawn cube method. So you can use this method and investigate anything, a building. It's kind of an X-ray tool to help you to investigate the site in multi-sense and multiple ways. And it will help you to make your design decisions. And this Wageningen tool, I'm happy to send the link to Nadia later, but you will find it anyway. But they spend their lifetimes drawing up all these roots. So we have all these intelligent documents now, but what we need to get better at is investigating deeply what is actually needed. And that is a flaw. I give you another good example. I showed it to my students on Tuesday. When architects design buildings, they love to have the building now like that, let's say even with a flat roof or something. And then it rains and rains. So after a while, the facade gets moldy. But in the old days, let's say in the Swiss Alps, a building was designed like that so that the water would percolate and protect the building. Now, of course, I don't want you to all design Swiss chalets, but this idea has a reason. This needs some serious designing to avoid the moldy facade in a country where it rains a lot, or at least in Vancouver it does. And so the appropriateness of designing and design thinking starts with hand drawing and starts with the investigation like I just showed you. This is the one for architects, since we are a profession working with them. But I just wanted to show you why this hand drawing, why this is so necessary and so important to use. I think when it comes to multisensorial design, you have, I've cited all the publications, and you can use these matrices I have described there, and you can give a different value, and then you can use the cube method and investigate your site, let's say in the surrounding context of the site. Let's say there's a road here, and on the other side of the road is a waste bin storage, and the smell is radiating around the site. So you can document, is the smell strong, medium, or high, and then you can document this, and that may have an impact then, if this is your site, how you're going to combat this problem of the smell. So it starts you really engaging with the site. The other good thing with the cube method is you can use the digital version and zoom in and out. So for example, I just draw it by hand. This is your site. So you can show much more context, smaller scale your site, or this is your site and you show more detailed context. So zooming in and out of the scale of your garden or project will then show you more of the detailing, let's say at the urban design scale, where it's about roads, where it's about bus stops, where it's about lighting, impact of light pollution. And the more you zoom out to show the bigger, it's more about the little detail, let's say the shade of a neighboring tree on your site. So it's those aspects you can do by tuning the site either smaller or larger on the computer. And then obviously draw your buildings of the site in it, and maybe even the surrounding buildings. And then also what is really cool, you can then always put it north up that way. Then you also can think about what happens here with the shade during the day. And even if it's not calculated by the meter, you can do this now with Rhino, immediately put the summer and winter solstice in, and then calculate what happens here with the shade in winter and summer. And when you start doing that, that's called rigorous understanding of the project before you start designing it. And then you start designing it, and then you do the same process again. So you can use the cube also when you have included your design into it. I think that's important because it helps you to really go deeper in understanding what the problems are of the site as is from a multisensorial way. And I think that's really the main points I wanted to raise. If you go online, Axo Demystified, I think it's demystified, maybe I spelled it wrong, demystified. Anyway, you will find it. My spelling is bad this morning. Axo Demystified is a blog. You can find it online, where I describe the tool with little tutorials and so on. And you can look on that and then use that tool appropriately. Basically, I just tried to explain a little bit why I did it. All the information, how to use it, is online. But I think it will help you immensely in your designing and process. But I would always use it in relation with the section. So to get some real scale, like measures where the groundwater table is, say, 1 meter below the surface, that will help you then to really investigate what kinds of roots you want to have in your site, to touch those and tap into that if that's an issue in your area of long summer droughts and so on. So it really helps you to, the section in together with the axonometric really helps you to understand the problem of the site. And I think annotating the drawings is one thing I've been observing with students. So annotating with dynamic like arrows to explain movement or interim stops of birds, or annotating sound of, let's say, cars. So the arrows using diagramming in section can help, but you can do the same also in the axonometric. Any questions? This is a good time.
Great. Any questions for Daniel? Okay.
All crystal clear?
Sounds like this is very clear. And I'll put this up. As I said, I have this recorded. So this is a great, especially with the capstone students.
How refined are these drawings before? Hold on.
Before you present them to a client.
They are not for the client. They are for you. Well, if you want to present them to the client and you're very proud of it, you can show them really refined. I think if you show a client process drawings and explains it's a process, he will understand. If you go to a lawyer and he drafts a letter for you, it's not the final letter. And then you go over it and over it again. So it's actually good for the client to see that you are not an instant. It's not instant, it's a process, and that's what he's paying for. It's actually a good thing. However, the drawings need to be drawn that they're legible, I think, and hand drawing is a good thing. It's got a personality to it, and it's your own drawing style, so it's a good thing.
Yeah, and this is actually good for your mandatory crit 1. These kind of drawings would be good because it's for us to see your process. It's not the final process presentation panels at the end. So during the mandatory crits and even the graded 1% desk crits, these are perfect kind of drawings that we like to see.
Yeah, and I think the more, you know, if you draw your axo, let's say, yeah, and you draw, let's say, there's a slope on your side and the slope goes down and there's another building here and your building is here, and you want to avoid, you know, in this area where you live is lots of rain. Maybe there is some kind of depression that the water doesn't go to the neighbor and flood his land. It's your responsibility. So you can draw this really quickly and explain, okay, we need to do some technical, doesn't need to, this is just a technical at the moment. And then the form of this, you can think later. But first, we need to have some barrier that the water, if there's rain for 4 months, is not going to the neighbor. If the flow, if the topography goes downhill like that. So you can immediately start thinking about these things. And what the professors love to see is you to speak. Your drawings need to talk. So you can, and then you can animate those as well. So you can press the button here, here at the top, and animate the rain and the water flow and show this to the professor and explain it. But the best way is to have it annotated. So while they can see it immediately, that they can give you much more feedback how you are thinking of the decisions you are making. And this is one of the biggest critique. Everybody shows these refined models, but there is no real understanding. How does that relate to the groundwater table? How does it relate to the precipitation in the area? How does it relate to the sunshine we have? And how does it relate to the soil we have? Can this soil actually take a LID system to drain it here? Or what do we do that the neighbors do we have to regrade the garden so that water is kept in the garden? So with these quick ways I just draw myself, you can explain visually and orally your intentions. And design process, the more design process drawings you show, the better they see how your concept is evolving. And the best way to do is you buy a roll of tracing paper and just draw on the roll and then pin it up, or you cut it and number it 1, 2, 3, 4, like I showed you with my book proposal. And then they see and can help you and give you really detailed critique about what you are doing. And I think one of the biggest challenges is, if you don't, then it's not clear why you did what you did. And the idea of learning is to show evidence. And our evidence in landscape architecture and architecture is drawing with annotation and very limited explanation. It should be done through the drawing, because the idea behind it is when you later on work in an office and you are sick for a month, somebody else in the office has to take all your notes and work on the drawing while you are away. And the client doesn't care if you are sick in the office. So everything you do has to be in a way that somebody else can get engaged with it. And to do so, your drawings and your thinking needs to be documented clearly. And if you learn that already at school, then it will help you to get better feedback from your professors on your intentions.
Okay, great. And do you have a few more sketches there for us, Daniel?
Yeah, there's more. Is there any more questions? I'm just checking. No more questions?
I've got a question.
Yeah.
Hi, Daniel. Thanks.
Hi.
I really appreciate both the tutorial and the lecture. One question that I've often had when thinking about this, when you're looking at the layers of a landscape and underground and the plants and kind of all the complexity, one thing that I've sometimes struggled with is when you start looking underground at things like groundwater and plant roots and plant suitability, you run into a lot of those things are really complicated, like groundwater dynamics and soils and how all those things work. And I've kind of, as a student, often thought about it can feel hard to make decisions around those conditions when I don't feel like I'm an expert on those conditions. I feel like there are so many different spheres that play into landscape, and it's impossible to kind of be an expert on all of them. And so I can do a certain amount of research, but I don't, the amount of understanding I can kind of have is always limited. So I'm curious if you have advice for how to guide, when do I know about this enough about something to have it inform my decisions, and how do I deal with the fact that there's so much complexity and it's really hard to understand everything.
I'm glad this is recorded, Jonathan. I agree. This is what is not appreciated. Landscape architecture is hugely complicated. And it is, I would say, one of the most complicated professions we have, like a lawyer or a judge who has to know a lot of cases to make a good judgment. It takes many, many years of experience to be a good to be a highly qualified landscape architect. And this is the problem. While you're in education, you're learning the basics. And the more you work in offices from different master landscape architects, like I did, for example, or people who have worked for many years, the more you get better at it. But you are right, you can't know everything. And this is why I'm developing these tools to help you to get better. I do a lot of open access tools, for example, about stormwater management. So if you as an officer are asked to do this, yes, you have a hydrological engineer, but at the end, when the client has approved, and at the beginning, to be really good at it, even in architecture, you have a structural engineer, but the architect needs to know basic structure to really design the building because of the way the columns are positioned. So I argue a landscape architect needs to know the science of stormwater to position what I just showed you and the soils. And I know that the education today is, at least when I was educated, it was a 7-year education, is much shorter because of the way the system works. But it didn't make shorter the knowledge you need to have. It actually makes it more complex today because of climate resilience issues, for example. You need to know so much. And when you do not know what the tool, this cube method tool basically tells you, it helps you to ask these questions. So the questions you could not answer, you can then either find online for rainwater management, for the lighting, etc. And if you can't find it, you can phone the municipality, ask. And if it's really specialistic, let's say you need a hydrologist, you have to hire that guy or a structural engineer. But it is your responsibility as a landscape architect. You are the manager of the whole thing, as well as the architect. You need to have an oversight and then ask the right person, either Mr. Google or a professional. It depends. And over the years with experience, you can evaluate this yourself. And the reason why this is so important, Jonathan, one of the major critiques in landscape architecture I have in construction drawing, that we are not as rigorous as a lot of the architecture students in learning about construction. And that has a lot to do with that we don't follow up in detail. I'll give you a good example. So if you have a wall and you want to have waterproofing on the wall, and the material to waterproof is only 3 meters, 2 meters wide in rolls, it's available. But the wall is 10 meters wide. So you have to order many different rolls to make this, and you have to seal it between them to make it watertight. But if you are not learning how to specify that and research deeply, then that is not rigorous. And this is one of the things we as landscape architects need to get much better in. And that's why I've been developing, I've updated the bio recently. I will send it to Nadia. In the recent years, I'm not doing so much green roof stuff. I'm doing open access tools for you guys and professionals to be better in the technical and scientific issues like landslides, to help the client. Let's say he wants to build a house, houses under near a slope, that you can evaluate maybe the slope isn't actually appropriate. So before much money is spent, dear client, we should buy other land or so that it makes you a better professional in advising the client. And then when you are actually building, then you get the structural engineer or the geotechnical engineer and ask the client, dear, I'm not a geotechnical engineer. These drawings need to be stamped. So we need the specialist, or we have to hire him, cost us $5,000 to $10,000. Please, client, hire this extra specialist. But in the end of the day, you are trained as a landscape architect when you are in practice for a few years to make those decisions. So it will take time. It sounds overwhelming now. Jonathan, I've been there. I've been doing this 30 years now. And I tell you, now I know what I'm doing. So it takes, and I'm getting gray hair. So it takes many, many years. And while you're in school, enjoy and make the most with your professors to learn ideation, be creative. Some of you, you are in the best age to come up with innovative ideas. If you go on the Landslide Tool blog, it was created by 2 graduate MLAs and 1 geography student, 4th year. He did the whole script, everything, 22 or 23 years old. So it has nothing to do with age. At the moment and where you are in your lives, you are very powerful, creative people. So what you do at university is ideation. And then the practical issues you will learn through practice in the offices during your licensure process. And the same goes for a doctor who does an internship, or a lawyer for a few years before they go to the bar. They have to train under another master. And the same goes for us. So don't worry about it. But the idea behind the cube is that it raises questions for you to investigate. While you draw, you are seeing all these things. You're seeing the problems, and then you can start probing and look up and judge the ones which are important for your design.
Okay, great. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
We can
Thanks,
move on.
Daniel.
That's
Does
great.
that
Thanks
help?
so much, Jonathan. Great question.
Very good question, Jonathan. I'm sorry I know my answers are long. I'm doing this intentionally. I'm glad they are recorded, that it can sink in. You can listen to this again. My job and Nadia's job is to encourage you to give your best in ideation. The nitty gritty, and if you go on the blog very soon, we've also created a tool to identify soil. We didn't invent this. This is a famous tool, but we made it really simple for you to use. So there's this document, you can download it, and then you can go out and experiment to judge soil, because I had a soil scientist help me with it. So what it does with learning these tools in your while you're at university is it makes you a more rigorous thinker. And through these exercises like the cube, like touching soil, like engaging with site, you learn. And to prove it to the professors, you draw it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. It would be great if we could maybe get a series of links or a place where we can find some of these open source resources.
I'll grab that from Daniel and I'll put it up on CourseLink for you guys.
I'm happy to do it.
That'd be fabulous.
And there will be publications coming out soon. Nadia will come to the conference when I go there about the landslide tool. The LID stuff, by the way, is all published online. If you go on my ResearchGate, I make every publication, only the books I'm not allowed, are free for you. So if you go Daniel Roehr ResearchGate, you find everything.
Great. Thank you.
But Nadia will send it to you.
Yeah, I'll take care. Yeah, I'll follow up with Daniel at the end and put something up on CourseLink. And this is good too, because maybe people who are doing more garden designs and smaller spaces can look at the kind of the sketching with the roots below, and then others could follow other links that are more appropriate to each capstone. So each one is tailored for your own specific topic and capstone.
There's one thing I just wanted to show. I don't know how much sketching you've had, but the eye level 1-point perspective is so easy. If you draw a person, it's a really easy tool. And you just saw a vanishing point, a 1-point perspective, VP1, and it's a really easy tool to draw. And this tool helps you so much. I use it all the time. You could even put some more lines here if you want, but this is the footpath here right now. But it is such an easy tool to learn how to draw and at the eye level to engage. The aerials I showed you at the beginning, which inspired my research in green roof, is not what you need right now. You need to show Nadia and her colleagues this experience in the space, what is the space like? And the vanishing point, that's the easiest way to do. You draw your person and the vanishing point is always the same. You could just draw the line VP and just draw the head if you wanted, and the smaller head in the background, smaller person. The head is always on the line. And if it's a child, it's down here on the hand. So it's a really easy way to engage, and then you can go in and start planting and putting things in, and then annotate what kind of planting this is, and really start using drawing as a communication tool, not as a representation tool, as a communication tool to your professors. This is the spaces I want to create. And later on, you go into Rhino or in your plan and do the visuals. But for thinking, the hand drawing is so much faster. And that's what I want to entice you to do, because it's also a language which you can use anywhere in the world, even if you don't speak the language. And it will help you globally if you work globally to communicate.
That's fantastic. We'll continue on here. Perfect. Thanks, Daniel.
I mean, I could do you a whole lecture on 1-point perspective, and I'm happy to come back sometimes in the semester. I don't want to overwhelm you. What is important for you is that it sinks in the cube method, that axonometric, simple block, tilted, expanded out, helps you to investigate sight. That's really the basic message. And sight at 3 levels, not just on the topography underneath and the atmosphere above. And with that, it's multisensorial, because with that, you have the smell, the sound, the touch, and the taste. Even the air can taste the fog when it's, you can feel it. So that you think much more in that realm and use the orthographic drawings, which is section, plan, elevation, to document the thing, while using the axonometric to show the multisensorial experience, not just the visual experience. Any other questions? Oh, Tim Edwards. Is that Tim Edwards, the reviewer of my book, or is it a student?
No, he's a student.
It's the same name.
Oh, I'm both. I'm both. Yeah.
Any other questions? By the way, Nadia, I mean, every time I do this talk, I do it a little bit different, because obviously I also learn like you guys. So I got this Wageningen thing last week. So when I prepared what I'm going to tell you guys today, I thought, wow, this is a really good tool and a good example with the cherry tree. Why maybe they should have used the cube method when they made the decision for the planting plan, when they think about the roots. So they've maybe thought about the tree above ground and the beauty of it, but forgot it has wider roots than instead of a root going a tap root kind of formation. Any other questions? All good? How we are with time?
Yeah, if we could do maybe another 15 more minutes, that'd be fine.
Okay. I'm just gonna look. So what I tell my students in my classes is when I use the cube method, so when they do their cube, let's say here is the cube, maybe that is also really helpful little information for you. Let's say here is, we've learned that now, there's the groundwater, is to actually make a list. What is actually important? So if it was me as a landscape architect, the first one I would be thinking of is soil. Then I would think about site boundary. And I mean the legal site boundary. What are they like? Is there a fence? Is there a wall? Is there a hedge? What's the condition around the site? What's the access to the site? Let's say there's a garage here for the car to be parked. Here's the car, terrible car with little, but it doesn't matter. It's not about how it is. It's just, so you think about access. You think about the grading. How is the site tilted? What's the major tilt of the site? This way, this way. Let's say, where is north? So really identify how the sun actually really moves. So sun path is important. and then also the climate. So the climate, by that I mean particularly precipitation. So I just draw the cloud as a memory. So the precipitation. So I can look that up in Canada. You can go anywhere in Canada online and look up. Best, what I use for my research, I use the airport data, airports, because the pilots, they need it every hour. So all the airports in Canada have the data available, so you know the rain. And that helps you to understand what kind of plants, how often it rains. That gives you an understanding of the programming of the garden and so on. Then I think existing plants, what kind of plants are there? Trees is clear, shrubs is clear, but also what kind of mosses on the existing side? Is there in the cracks between some paved areas? What kinds of plants? Lichens. So not just the sort of obvious. This starts you to really think deeply about investigating the site appropriately. Then views. You can think about views. Let's say there's a mountain range to look at, or there's the coastline here. That could be the coastline. So understand the views in and out. Also looking from here out, but also going around the site and looking towards your site, the impact of that as well. So those things are really, really important. So I use the cube often how to investigate and make myself a list. I see a question, Shanaze. How would you represent grading on axonometry? I found it's difficult to, oh, very easy. So I will do this for you right now. I will not save this. New sketch. There we go. Don't save, discard. Here, very simple. So if this is your site, I draw it dotted. There's the guided lines. The only thing you can do at this level, and I think this is important. First of all, you need to read. So this is your site. There's the road. You need the grading plan. So the first thing I taught grading for many years, created the grading and drainage course here. Grading never goes alone. Grading and drainage always go together. So the grading determines the drainage. Let's say this is the grading, and you can find this here in Vancouver on Van Maps. It's free, and then you can and then put that in Google, and then it gives you, let's say, the grading. So if that is the case, and this is your site, you hold on, I'll make this red. So this is your site. So here's the site. Then you put the grades in, and I will draw the grades black. The contours, so there's the contours. And then you know if this is 1 and this is 4, it will slope, and it slopes angled, it will slope something like, you can go higher here, it will slope a bit down and then even more down. That's what it looks like. So I draw this with a fat pen. And that would be the slope. So it will basically drain this way, drains this way. And of course, this could be more complex, but for the most important understanding is to interpret, and I'm sure you've had grading classes, that's the most important, but the grading should also be, the contours should always be around the side as well. So you should be looking at the context as well. Is there water coming from the top, from the different sides, and is water draining out? So this is a really good and important question. I would always actually start with that you look at the contour plan and then interpret that graphically quickly into your drawing. So that's the way I would do it. And it's not about accuracy. It just shows you the basic flow. And then you use the drawing, the real grading drawing. Let's say you change the grades and then work it out like you have done in your grading and drainage lectures, I'm sure. But for this analytical process, it's just important to know the overarching way how the water flows existing, and then how the surrounding area flows go, let's say, onto your site or off your site, or if you have to protect it for climate resilience reasons or for flooding. The more you investigate in those things, the better. But this is a very good question, and I'm glad you asked it. So, any more questions? This is your chance. We have about 5 minutes left, I think. So you've now seen me doing the list and how I use the cube to think with it. You've learned about maybe starting with the grading plan and then integrating that visually into your drawing, and then you can build up your existing condition and your new condition. Anything else?
Okay, I think, Daniel, that was great. I think there aren't any more questions. That was great. And I think you answered quite a lot of questions here, and very engaging. And I really want to appreciate your you coming on here today and your time, and also doing your lecture beforehand and these quick sketches that, you know, these are things that are telling of the site. They're very analytical and they communicate something that you would like to do on the site. So they're not refined by all means, but it's something that you definitely could use, especially with the process when we're having desk critiques. No, not for the final presentation, but definitely for the process and when you're kind of communicating your design. So I'm really happy that you're showing the hand drawings, because they're quick, they're easy, and they allow the students to quickly communicate their ideas to the professors.
Yeah, I mean, in the end of the day, I would always say landscape is based on the grading and I mean, Cornelia Hahn-Oberländer, which I showed you in the photo at the beginning, she always said grading is more important than planting. And that's clear, because the way you grade the land will tell you where the most humid areas are, where the driest areas are, if you make some mounds or some swales or whatever you're doing, the depressions, you know, in your piece of land, that because of that, the water will flow there. So it will stand there depending on what kind of soil it is, and that will determine what kind of plants can handle that or not. And so I think the grading question was really great. Thank you for asking it, because it is really a tool to help you to quickly think for yourself. It's basically note-taking, analytical note-taking to understand the site. And of course, now we could do a whole lecture, what that would then do to my design. You know, I could step it, I could do, but that will be, I don't want to overwhelm you. I'm more interested to teach you the existing condition and understanding that in relation to the area around it. There is no land, so you need to understand the context, particularly depending on the scale of the project. If it's a, let's say, a park, you need to understand the whole city, because what is the park doing in relation to the other parks? So you would be going in with mapping and then zooming in and then use the AXO blog. This blog I showed you for the site, but at the beginning you would start with maps, understanding it, and then you would go in and look at the contours and so on. So this is a tool to help you to relate the site to the immediate context.